JK Rowling. Men defining what a woman is, what women should and shouldn't fear, what women should and shouldn't say, what rights women should be fine with giving up, and of course, what constitutes real misogyny. Get a bloody mirror. That's real misogyny looking right back at you. Now, of course, even in the United Kingdom, women are more pro-trans than men are. So if we're actually just going by what women consider to be real misogyny, women have decided that trans women are valid. If you've been paying attention to the headlines, you might be aware of the fact that very recently, just a few days ago, the UK government essentially banned trans women from female prisons, which is, super great and definitely in line with the facts of the matter and also with material reality. And don't worry, we'll get to that. We've covered a good deal of the sort of legal lead up to this point. But I think one of the most important things to remind yourselves of when we're talking about this is that the latest data from the Ministry of Justice states there are 230 transgender prisoners in all of England and Wales. That's not 230 transgender women in women's prisons, by the way. That is 230 transgender prisoners. From Pink News right here, 181 trans prisoners were in male estates and 49 were in female estates. 49 trans women in female estates? Well, no. 6 of those were trans women. The rest are trans men. There are 6 trans women in women's prisons in all of England and Wales. This reminds me of when state Republicans were trying to pass laws banning trans athletes from participating in sport teams of their preferred gender. In states with like 3 trans athletes, period. Like one of whom who was a woman. It is completely detached from material reality. Nothing here has anything to do with actual, like, circumstantial, like literally nothing. Females in female prison are sexually abused by each other at times, oftentimes by prison wardens, staff, guards. The idea that there is some kind of epidemic of transgender women preying on cisgender women in women's prisons is completely immaterial. It hasn't been demonstrated. And you might notice, by the way, that conservative media has made no effort to demonstrate this point because they've essentially conceded the very concept of empirical reality. They are no longer interested in proving that the stuff they care about matters in any sense other than the abstract. They will scream and hem and holler. They will hysterically bellow from the rooftops about the great threat they face from, check stats, 6 trans women in England and Wales in women's prisons. Anyway, speaking of hysterical hollering, JK Rowling. Men defining what a woman is, what women should and shouldn't fear, what women should and shouldn't say, what rights women should be fine with giving up, and of course, what constitutes real misogyny. Get a bloody mirror. That's real misogyny looking right back at you. Now, of course, even in the United Kingdom, women are more pro-trans than men are. So if we're actually just going by what women consider to be real misogyny, women have decided that trans women are valid. More men go the other way than women. So even if we're going by a purely cynical, liberal, idpol, demographically oriented argument, as for, like who gets to define what misogyny is, this is not a winning case on her part. But remember, this entire argument is being made, even in Britain, yes. This entire argument is being made off the basis of, like, I hope to God they never look at the data. Hold on. Where's the gender split here? Oh, does this particular poll not take in the breakdown between men and women? Well, either way. A lot of numbers there for sure. Remember, this is a position you can only have if you are epistemically opposed to basing your positions on anything real in the real world. It does split by gender near the bottom. Well, you tell me that after I already closed it. So there's this attitude from JK. And by the way, so to be clear with my position on this, JK Rowling is a genocidal leader of a hate movement. The attitude that J.K. Rowling has and other TERFs have on trans people is literally they need to not exist. That's not an exaggeration. The actual explicit stated goal of quite a lot of them when they've talked on internet shows, podcasts, panels, even sometimes in real life is just they need to not exist, which I don't know how like that seems fairly straightforwardly genocidal to me. But even when they're talking sort of casually about trans people, they cannot help but vomit out evidence for the idea that they're just hateful and it has nothing to do with protecting women. I don't know about you, but excluding women from women's prisons just because they've got penises, male pattern baldness, and have committed a couple of seems awfully turfy to me. Male pattern baldness, much like regular transphobes, and I argue, by the way, that the term TERF is essentially meaningless because J.K. Rowling isn't a feminist. She pals around almost entirely with far-right people, with fascists, with neo-Nazis. I think she was replying positively to CatTurd02 on Twitter the other day. She said positive stuff about Matt Walsh before. Like the idea that she has a feminist inclination, not even remotely. More like a weaponization of feminism for an already conservative agenda. But anyway, the male pattern baldness thing, much like regular transphobes, the actual argument here is to evoke in your mind a kind of negative caricature of trans women, which serves to make you feel disgust. I've always argued this, but I really do think we're kind of reaching the singularity here, where all anti-trans arguments are essentially the same as those wojacks that unhinged pollsters post on Twitter with like the soy wojack with like the blue hair who's killing themselves or something, or they have like the tits but like a dick bulge or what. Like it all comes back to a grossly drawn soy jack at the end of the day. That is their argument. It's not at all dissimilar to the way that if you take a look at a lot of anti-Semitic forums online, their primary form of communication seems to be them posting back and forth the happy merchant drawing. You remember the drawing, right? The one where they're doing the this hand pose and the exaggerated hook nose and such and such. Why do Nazis love that drawing so much, I wonder? Well, I think it's because it's a fairly straightforward depiction of the actual stupidity and cruelty of their beliefs. Like, their actual beliefs aren't, a well-reasoned deconstruction of the influence Jewish people have in society because A, they're too stupid to understand anything like that, and B, they never bothered to begin with. Nobody who ever went after black people did so because they had some, well-researched and exhaustive breakdown of data to indicate that black people are bad or whatever. They did it because they were stupid and angry and hated black people. You go talk to your average racist from 1840, and they're not going to give you a well-reasoned dissertation on the origin of man and how, in line with Darwinian principles. 1840, is that too early for Darwin? I don't know. The subspecies of man must be kept there. They're not going to say that. They're going to spit at you and say the N-word. And likewise, if you take transphobes today, and you ask them, hey, why do you have an issue with trans people? They're not going to give you any data on the 6 trans women in women's prisons in all of England and Wales. They're not going to make a well-reasoned argument. They're going to essentially just post that wojack over and over and over again. Anyway, female ex-prisoner in Scotland describes the daily reality of being forced to share shower areas and cells with trans women convicted of domestic abuse and murder. This is the very definition of cruel and degrading punishment, because she definitely never had to share any shower areas and cells with cis women convicted of domestic abuse and murder. See, again, notice how the argument being made here. So, first of all, again, so this is Scotland, not England and Wales, so it's not 6. It's probably, 12 women or whatever. So yeah, was she, attacked? I haven't read this. Maybe I'll get epically owned in one fell swoop. A former prisoner has told how she went through hell after being forced to share a shower block with violent trans inmates. She was so terrified of being raped and ending up pregnant, she felt compelled to have a contraceptive coil fitted while behind bars. The mum of 4, locked up with 2 trans prisoners, one convicted of murder, the other for domestic violence, accused Nicola Sturgeon of serving up women to predators on a rainbow platter to Scotland's jails. Oh, so nothing happened. So in other words, nothing happened. Wow, what a fitting, what a wonderful case study to indicate the mental state of UK transphobes here. 72,000 likes on this, opening with, I was spooked. Now, don't get me wrong, prison's a scary place, but you're going to have to demonstrate to me that what's happening here is a product of trans people specifically. You would need data to suggest that trans people are more predisposed to violence in women's prisons than cis women are. No such data exists, of course, obviously, because if it did, I would know about it. It doesn't. We do, however, have data on trans women in men's prisons. That is to say, they're near constantly, which means that the decision to keep trans women in men's prisons rather than women's prisons is an objectively pro-rape decision. My whole time in prison was on constant high alert. My nerves were frazzled with fear. These incredibly violent men were walking around the communal shower naked and sometimes clearly aroused. Myself and other women were in cubicles with only a curtain to protect us, so they just were walking around the shower area. I was shaking with fear. In the end, I went to a prison clinic and had a coil fitted because I believed I could be at any time. I didn't want one. I felt forced to do it. So you did it of your own will, but you didn't want one? There was around 40 prisoners, and 2 of them were trans. Neither appeared to be women. They dressed as men. They didn't wear... They dressed as men? You're in prison. What clothing are you... You're in prison. What clothing are you given? What? What, did they give them the men's prison's uniform? UK doesn't have the same prison outfits. So what? They were like, oh, for you two trans women have these male jumpsuits? What? They didn't wear makeup. Are you allowed makeup in I thought prison makeup was like this like smuggle in stuff to look pretty thing. Maybe this is more of an American prison thing, but like how many cis women in there were wearing makeup? No, so notice the language here. Like, okay, so we're all 38 of the cis women here in makeup, and there were just 2. Like the way the description here is made to sound like it's like you have 38 like dainty women, and then you have like 2 like guys called like Jack and Horner, okay, walking around with their giant lat spread, you know, like, and all 38 of them are wearing high heels and like little 50s dresses and makeup and stuff, and the other 2 are wearing like what, biker leather? Honestly, I had no idea with prison makeup. It's a whole thing. This is the UK uniform? What? It's just sweats? Really? Oh. Damn. This is such a gendered outfit. Got like listen, okay? When all the women in the prison were wearing this, all right, they looked very dainty and feminine, and they were all wearing makeup and high heels. But then there were the 2 trans women who were both 8 feet tall, and actually they were both wearing, I don't know, but they were both wearing like, I was about to think like, what's the most masculine, stupid article of clothing I can think of? And the first thing I thought in my mind was boxing gloves. So yes, there were 2 trans women walking around the showers with erections and boxing gloves. Yes. All the women who were forced to be in that prison with these people were vulnerable in different ways. Many of them have been the victims of male violence, irrespective of their own offending. Damn, but a lot of them have also been the victims of female violence. So, what's your point? Wow, that's seriously it. Literally, her account, her actual literal account here is, I was scared, but nothing happened. That was actually, genuinely, authentically the entirety of this article. The rest of it just goes on to talk about law stuff. Okay, great. No trans women in female jail have a history of violence against women in Scotland. This is in Scotland, yeah. Because there's like 5 trans women in female... There's not that many. There's not that many trans women who get arrested for shit. That just sounds like white lady scared a black dude because black. Oh, if you want to draw historical comparisons, what is being talked about here is identical to what was written and said after integration, after desegregation. Literally unequivocally the exact same thing with no differences. White women didn't want black people, or sorry, didn't want black women in women's spaces because they thought that black women were more violent, more muscular, more prone to you know, like initiating confrontations, whatever. And the same arguments were made about black people in white spaces generally. And they would do the exact same thing that J.K. Rowling here is doing, where rather than make arguments or defer to data, they would make these like off-hat, intuition-based arguments that do nothing but reinforce the Wojak building in the mind of the bigot. Joanne also publicly endorsing an anti-choice as well. She's very concerned with women's rights. Casey Triller, I said I love J.K. Rowling. Just followed you. Welcome to my club. Women won't be liberated until we're free from abortion, from Kaylee Triller. Hands Across the Aisle Coalition from Kaylee Triller. Haver committed statutory rape of a teenage boy and became pregnant while working as a youth counselor for a Christian organization. Before founding HATAC, Haver was the communication director for Just Want Privacy, a campaign to repeal a law in Washington state that allows transgender people to use the bathrooms corresponding to their identity. Just Want Privacy was... Yeah, nice. Groomer, anti-choice, conservative. Damn, only the best people in this camp. JK Rowling will accept literally anyone of any political disposition as long as they hate trans people. It is the broadest tent possible as long as you want to genocide trans people. And she is pro-rape, 100%. Absolutely she is. If no evidence can be found whatsoever that putting trans women in women's prisons increases the amount of sexual assault, but putting them in men's prisons massively increases it, then the decision to put them in men's prisons is a pro-rape one. I saw this, and this was particularly funny. Same shit, different century. Just, since this one was brought up in, what, Parliament or whatever, the idea of, like, some kind of historical synchronicity being drawn between the anti-suffragettes and this image. It's fine because she raped a white, not a woman. Yeah, oh, J.K. Rowling doesn't care. Listen, J.K. Rowling literally wrote, back when all this was starting, a little, like, blog essay or whatever, where she was extremely clear, where she said, like, my dislike of trans people is that I repressed my gender incongruence when I was young. I was sexually abused by a man, and I never got over it. I'm traumatized, and, like, that's it. She just said it. It's not like armchair analysis. She just fucking said it. It's right there. She just admitted all of it. The entirety of the anti-trans movement is being headed by someone who is just, like, straightly feels over reals. And meanwhile, mind you, I remember no conservative has ever cared about the state of prisoners or of prison ever up until right now over the state of 6 trans women in women's prisons in the UK. Male-on-male jokes in prison have been a non-stop subject of mirth and amusement for them. They do not give a shit about male guards, female prisoners in female prison. I remember back when Orange is the New Black came out. Remember the mid-Netflix show that started good and got worse with time, where you had the porn stash guard guy or whatever that set off a bunch of discourse on, like, the treatment of female prisoners and stuff. I remember conservatives would lose their mind over the idea that female prisoners had any right to complain. Was it the Democratic candidate for governor in Florida who said that they needed to make it a priority to give air conditioning in their prisons so that prisoners wouldn't, die of heat stroke? And she got ratioed on Twitter for it because conservatives were like, don't want to die of heat stroke in a concrete cell in the middle of a swamp? Well, then don't steal a candy bar. Dumb. She got a ton of hate for that because conservatives do not care about, they don't care if they're tortured. Oh, conservatives, all pro-torture, by the way. Pro-Gitmo, don't care about murder. They're evil people. Conservatives are inhumane, disgusting monsters. But now suddenly, 6 trans women in women's prisons, no evidence tied to any of them doing anything wrong in their time here, apparently. And we're just flat out busting out the legislation over this. We're busting out this legislation so dedicatedly that the English court, Westminster, was it, denied Scotland the ability to have their own law guaranteeing easy gender identification changes for transgender people because it would have gotten in the way of England enforcing their rules on their 6 transgender women in women's prisons. The goal here, obviously, is the eradication of trans people. J.K. Rowling wants them dead or gone. In practice, the only way to make an entire group of people gone is either to kill them or to legislate them out of existence so that any expression of their identity makes their life so intolerable that they might as well just stay in the closet. These are both genocidal attitudes. There's nothing really else to it. First time they've ever done that, by the way, using Section 35. Yes, keeping Scottish trans people from easily self-identifying was so important to England that Westminster blocked Scottish law the first time in decades. It's funnier, the same meme was used by a TERF MP to prove TERF prosecution in the House of Parliament. Yeah, I talked about this. Is she a TERF, by the way, or is she just a regular conservative? This was in Scottish politician minister, Scottish National Party. Oh, apparently she resigned, and then she was elected as the chair. Oh, she resigned from the SNP National Executive Committee and then was elected as the chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights. Lovely. Cherry argued young trans people must be treated like any other children with psychological problems, and called for Scotland's only gender identity clinic to be closed. On October 2022, the Daily Telegraph reported that, with fellow gender-critical parliamentarians Rosie Duffield from the British Labour Party and Anne Jenkin from the Conservative Party in the House of Lords, she was set up a cross-party biological policy unit to help ensure policies across the public sector that are based on gender identity theory must be documented and scrutinized. Little on the nose there? That's true. That's also true, guys. 6 trans women in women's prisons. 6. Bit grim, huh? Bit grim, innit? If you're watching right now and you haven't subscribed, you are contributing to the impending genocide of trans people. Well done. It's well known that a Vaushite coalition is the only thing capable of stopping British parliamentarian turfism. So you have to hit that button. You're like every person who hits the sub button and rings the bell is like the Tiananmen Square tank guy. What the actual fuck is up with that Rowling post where she says she might have transitioned in the 80s if she had the means? How is that not a bigger deal? Because, and I've said this before, every person who disagrees with you sincerely is mentally ill. Because you, if you're watching me, probably agree with me on a lot of issues. So, but more specifically with me. Conservatives are a hodgepodge of ideological and emotional contradictions and self-hatred. And they will make it your problem. Every conservative black person who grows up hating black people because they like have survivorship bias from growing up in the ghetto, then like getting a lot of money, they will make it your problem. Every conservative gay person who grows up thinking that the LGBTQIA alphabet people are annoying and actually like rebukes every single group that ever made any progress towards their own livelihood, they will make it your problem. Every bit of self-hate from every minority that ever became a member, any conservative advocacy group, your problem now. You know, people will literally become conservatives instead of getting therapy. A lot of them are just grifters, but, you know. Hey, Vaush, looks like that cis woman prisoner from the article was in there for assault. So where does she get off complaining about being locked up with violent... I just can't believe they made an entire article, which was this bitch being like, oh, I feared for my life. She didn't list any threats. She didn't list anything. Those 2 trans women in that prison never laid a hand on her and never said shit to her. Because if they had, she would have had it written down in the article. Literally. They didn't do anything. They didn't even look at her funny. Because if they did, she would have had it written down in the article. Anything on their from their behavior that could have been considered even remotely problematic would have been written down, and yet nothing was. Only that she was scared because they were not dressing like women in their unisex prison fatigues, or sorry, in their unisex prison sweats, and they didn't wear makeup. Must protect scared white women. Oh, and don't get me wrong, guys. There's a reason why every single cis woman who fears for her life whenever she has to breathe the same air a trans woman exhaled is white. And the reason for that is because they're playing on the exact same set of fears and paranoia that they did with the Muslim groomer panic crisis. It's all the same white nationalist bullshit. It all comes right back to it. Look at this poor, fearful white woman to whom nothing is happening. Now, wouldn't you hate it if a Muslim, scratch out, immigrant, scratch out, black freed slave, scratch out, transgender woman, scratch out, did something to hurt them? Same thing every single time. That's not really true, Vaush. In my community, there are plenty of POC. I'm not talking about whether or not the transphobes themselves are POC. I'm talking about whether or not the rhetoric and attitudes and policy being implemented here are being done in the same way with the same rhetoric as with the fear of the white woman being hurt or whatever. Same goddamn shit.